Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to kind of go back on the line of sight project that we started yesterday. When I made the video, I'd completely forgotten that there was a new set of collision functions that GameMaker Studio 2 implemented, and that's called the collision, whatever kind of collision list. So that's what we're going to do today. Consider this to be an intermediary, so kind of like an in-between from the first one, between the first one and the next video that's coming up, which is going to be a collision rectangle one. So basically, we've got the same project that we started off with. I'm going to give everybody the link to that page, but basically here in the room, let's open up that. We've got our enemy here, which is the red dude. We've got a block here. It's just a plain block, there's no programming in it, and we've got the player. So if you did yesterday's video, you would know what we've got here. So we just got some basic movement and all of that. So that's all it is. There's no programming in it yet. We're going to be starting from scratch again. Like I said, I have the template in the link in the description. I'll try to put up a card if I can remember to do that. But let's get started with the programming. So this one is going to be kind of similar, but also kind of different to the first line of sight video that I did for GMS 2. The main difference being that we are going to, instead of just starting to program straight away, we're going to create a list. But before we get into that, I'm going to extend this to 128 just so that it makes it easier to kind of get my point across for this video. So we have all of these code blocks, I guess, in the template. So don't worry if anything's missing. Well, there shouldn't be anything missing. But just in case, actually, I think this isn't written in the template. So let's get rid of that line of code. So we don't actually need that. Yes, like I said, we're going to get started. Now, the first thing that we need to do is in the enemy create event, we are going to create a list, and we're going to call this target list is ds_list create. Done. So basically what it does is at the start of the game, or rather when the enemy gets spawned into the room, it's going to create a list, a ds list, data structure list, and it's going to be called target list. Now, before we go into the actual meat and potatoes of today's project, we are going to add in a destroy event. So the difference between destroy and cleanup, I'm not going to go through that in this video today. I think that would be better because it's kind of off topic. So let's add in a destroy event. So basically what happens is when the enemy dies, even though we're not going to actually create any death script for it, what we're going to do is we're going to say ds list, and we are going to destroy, and we are going to destroy target list. Now the reason why we do this is that when we actually quit the game, if we create a list but then don't destroy it, that's going to cause a lot of problems for us. It's going to cause memory leaks, and eventually your game will crash. So imagine if you have like 10, 20, 30 enemies in one screen, and they all have a target list that you didn't destroy. That's going to cause a lot of problems. All right, now that's done. That's all of the extra programming we need to do. So we've got those two lines, the target list in the create event, and in the destroy event, we're going to destroy that list. All right, now that that's done, we are going to now go into the step event. So here we're going to use, if you watched yesterday's video, we used collision line. However, in this case, we're going to type in var, and we're going to say hit. So it looks kind of the same so far, but today we're going to use collision_line. And instead of this top one that we used yesterday, we're going to use this second one, collision line list. And like I said, just like yesterday, we're only going to be checking along the x-axis, but this is more flexible in that, well, I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to type in x, y as our origin points, and x plus site range x as our end point, and y is not going to go anywhere. Now the object we're going to check for, we're going to check for B actors. Are we doing precise checking? Nope, we're not. False. Not me. Yep, we don't want to check ourselves. And the list that we're going to reference here, right? If you look down here at the bottom, it says list. So here we are going to feed them into the target list, DS list. And are we going to have it ordered in terms of distance? Yes, we are. We're going to set that to true. So that's what it is. We have our start point, our end point, the object we're looking for. If we're going to include the calling object, which is the enemy, and we don't want to. If this is precise collision checking, if we're going to add the enemy as well. And then, of course, which list we're going to add it to, which is the target list. And, of course, we're going to make sure that we target the closest object to us. And so that's why we set it to true. All right, let's go into the next one here. Now, down here, we're going to say if hit is greater than 0. So that means that if we hit more than one object, we are going to create a new variable here, and we're going to say closest. Closest, that looks right. And basically what we want is we want to get the ID of the closest object to us. So we're going to say target list, and we are going to use an accessor here. So we're going to use this symbol here, which is that straight line. If you're using a Japanese keyboard like me, it's actually next to the backspace key. It's shift plus line, and we're going to use the position at 0. Right, so that's what it looks like here. So basically what this means is it's going to get this, whatever object is at 0.0 in the target list. All right, I think you can have it at 0, but just to be safe, we should have the accessor as well. Anyway, let's keep going. If you don't know where that is, if you're using like a US keyboard, I think if I remember right, it's above it should be somewhere close to the enter key or the return key. That's where this key is. It's shift something. I forgot which one it is. I've been using a Japanese keyboard for so long. So just try to find it if you can. All right, so the next one here is if. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check the closest ID. So if the closest dot ID is not the same as our enemy's ID, so basically if it's a different object, we're going to set the point X, which is, if we open up the create event here, point X, we're going to set that to be, closest dot X minus the enemy's X position, right? So that's going to give us a distance, right, where it needs to be. And then what we need to do, and this step is extra important, we're going to DS list, and we are going to use the clear, and we are going to clear the target list. Now basically what DS list clear does, is that it takes this list that we created, the target list, and it basically deletes all of the entries in it. Basically the list goes from however many collisions there were back to 0. It's not the same as destroy because the list actually still exists, right? It just doesn't show up, as in it's an empty list, right? So we need to clear it every time we set a new point. The reason being because we need to update it, and so we need to tell it to, hey, we've found the closest point. We need you to now clear the list. All right, so that's basically all that it does. All right. Now, in the draw event, to make sure that all of this works, we're going to type in draw. Let's draw that line first. Draw line color, X, Y, and then X plus site range, X and Y, because we don't need it to go anywhere. Color 1, we're going to use C. I'm going to use teal again, and C underscore teal. All right. Now, we also want it to draw where we find point X, right? So we're going to say draw rectangle color. We're going to say X, point X. No, actually X plus point X, point X. We're just going to draw a small circle, so -2, small square, so -2, then Y, -2, and then X plus point x plus 2 and y plus 2. And color, we're just going to use, let's use white in this case. White, C, white, C, white, C, white. Yeah, I know this takes a while, but C, white. I just want to make sure that everything works. And so this is one way that you can make sure that things like line of sight works. And the outline, we don't want it to be outline. We want it to be a solid block. So let's have a look at that. All right, here's what's going to happen. So now we can see that the block here, we can see a little white square next to the orange block because this is the first thing that it sees. Now, technically, when the player is here, it's in the line of sight, but because the block here is in the way, it's still going to reference that. But as soon as we walk in front, all of a sudden our enemy is looking at the player. And so this makes it a lot more flexible than the previous version. However, both still work. It really depends on what you're using it for. This would be good for stationary objects, things like turrets or spotlights or things like that. The reason being because it doesn't need to have like constantly updating X and Y positions. So if you can imagine like a sweeper arm, right? Kind of like, think of like a turret that's like rotating. It doesn't need to update its X or Y position. It may only need to update either X or Y. So this is really useful for having multiple targets being detected and choosing which one's closest and acting in a certain way. So to extend this a little bit further, what you can do is you can actually just call some extra code down here. So down here, if the closest ID is something else, then do something cool here. So really, that's all you need to do to extend it. So maybe you want to add in some extra behavior, like maybe you want it to start following the enemy, following the player, or maybe start shooting at the player, doing something like that. Of course, naturally, you can always have sight range Y added as well, and included with that a point XY. Now, we're not going to do that because it's just a little bit outside of the scope of this. The whole idea for this type of video or this type of format that I'm trying out is for you guys to be able to get creative with the code. So hopefully you guys learned a little extra something on top of that. Again, this is a new function here, the collision list functions. They're relatively new to GMS2, and they're much more flexible than their original counterparts, being the collision line or previous versions of that. So anyway, guys, the next one will actually be the real collision rectangle version of this. But in the same way, we're going to use collision rectangle list, not collision rectangle, just so that we can have multiple target tracking. And hopefully you guys are looking forward to that. And hope you learned something. That's all for me, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.